Hey y'all, Chelsea and Danny here.
Enjoy this episode of Today's Homeowner here on YouTube.
This is a fairly impressive room, but wait till you see what we're about to do to the ceiling.
Today's Homeowner with Danny Lipford, the voice of home improvement, with projects, tips, and ideas to help you improve your home.
Well, this is a fairly large room, about 22 by 32, but it'll look even larger once we complete the alteration on the ceiling. Now, what we plan on doing is removing all of the drywall, both skylights, all of the electrical work, and reframe this ceiling to where it's a large vaulted ceiling, actually raising the center part of the room up about 3 to 4 more feet than what it is now. You know, altering a ceiling or making modifications to an existing ceiling is a very popular way of making a room appear much larger and modernizing that room as well. Well, over the course of the next half hour, we'll show you a complete transformation of this room with the ceiling alteration and check in on a few other types of ceilings that you may get some ideas on how you can change up one of the rooms in your home. Stay with us. Yeah, let's start the first sheet right over in this corner and then we'll just go back and forth. Hey, one of the first and most important steps in any renovation project, especially one when you're taking so much ceiling material down, is to adequately cover up the workspace. Now, we started off with putting some corrugated cardboard down. This is relatively inexpensive. You can get it from a janitorial supply company, and it provides good dust prevention on the floor, or dust containment, as well as a little bit of padding. Now, in normal situations, that would be enough, but when we have so much material that'll be dropping down, we're adding a layer of 1/2-inch plywood on top of it to prevent any damage to the brick floor that's below it, because it's almost impossible in most cases and most floors to replace just one small section of it, so this will prevent any problems along those lines. Now, another thing that's very important is trying to contain all of the dust in this area, because we'll be really stirring up a lot of dust when we start bringing all of the ceiling material down. Now, earlier we removed all of the furniture and television and all from this room into an adjacent room, and you can see the guys are putting up a lightweight plastic and taping it all the way around the perimeter. They'll also tape it at the floor, and we'll even lean up a couple pieces of plywood here to prevent anything from possibly hitting into that room. The challenge you have is most houses that have central air and heating have a return air system that pulls air through that return air throughout the home. In this case, it can pull the dust out of this room into the rest of the home. With closing it off like this, we won't have that problem. Our next step is to cover up these nice looking walls. Besides the floor, we're also protecting the mantel and hearth with plywood, and for safety's sake, we'll use it to cover the cased openings to adjoining rooms. The horizontal trim board around the top of the walls has to go before the ceiling is removed, so the guys simply staple the plastic curtain to the wall in its place. This way, there's no damage to the finished portion of the wall from tape or staples, and the 4mm plastic is held securely in place all around the room. Finally, another sheet of plastic is laid on the floor to help contain the mess we're about to create. The drywall removal itself starts slowly with small pieces, but soon picks up steam with larger and larger pieces coming down more and more quickly. Above the drywall are a series of 1x4 furring strips that have to be pried loose from the joist so that the insulation above them can be removed. The tunnels that deliver light from the skylights are also demolished, and with them, part of the trusses which support the weight of the roof. A temporary support is nailed up until we can engineer a more permanent solution. With all of the ceiling material removed, we can see how the original ceiling was framed. They framed it using all 2x4s, both for the ceiling joist as well as the roof rafters. Then they created kind of a homemade truss with angle bracing and a few little metal plates they nailed on in order to span this 22-foot span. Well, all of that's going away in order to create this new vaulted ceiling. That's going to take a little bit of carpentry work, and Mark Buffkin, our lead carpenter, has got it all figured out. How are you going to handle this, Mark?
Well, we've notched these braces in order to get the 2x8 in there for a ridge, and we're going to support it off the floor until we get our new rafters in, and that should do it. Okay, now we have the 2x4 rafters now, so what are you going to replace those with? We're going to leave them here so we don't disturb the roof. I got you. And then we're going to sister a 2x8 to it, bring it in there, nail it to the ridge, and it'll be self-supporting. That's great. Now, I know we have to get, of course, a lot of things relocated here. We've got gas lines and all kinds of things. What about the air conditioning out to this area? Well, we're gonna drop the ceiling down about 16 inches with a flat spot. It's going to be about 3 or 4 foot wide, and that'll allow room for the ductwork to come to feed this room.
That's where in these kind of jobs you have to have some careful coordination between the air conditioning man, the plumber, and of course all of the framing that's taking place so that everybody has the room they need to bring out all of the different utilities. And speaking of utilities, looks like you need a plumber here pretty soon.
Yeah, I just called him, and he's on his way to come see what all he needs to do to get this out of the way.
Okay, well you got it under control.
The new 2x8 ridge we're creating has to be put together from 2 different pieces which are joined in the center with an angled seam and splinted from the side. With the new ridge in place and a few temporary braces, we're ready to remove the old trusses and begin creating our new ceiling. After simple solutions, we'll show you the results.
It's time for this week's Simple Solution from home repair expert Joe Truini.
Joe and I are right at the start of a minor renovation of this room. Our first step is to carefully remove all of the existing moldings.
Well, in this case, we're going to remove the molding and save it for reuse later. So I'm going to start by using a razor knife to cut the paint line right along the top of the molding so when I pull it off, it doesn't damage the wall. And then, in this case, also, I'm going to use 2 different pry bars, a really thin one to get it started and a slightly heavier one to pull the molding off the wall. So I'm going to start by tapping this in right here. After tapping in the pry bar, pull back on it slightly and drive in a couple of wood shims. Then you can move down the wall a foot or 2 and repeat the process of driving in the thin pry bar followed by a couple of wooden shims. When the molding is about 1/4 of an inch or so off the wall, use the larger bar to get more leverage and to finish removing the molding from the wall. Now once you pull the molding off the wall, chances are the nails will come with them. But don't make the mistake of trying to drive the nail in from the back because you might damage the front surface. You're better off pulling them using a pair of pliers, or in this case, a pair of end nippers. You just grab the nails and roll it over, pulls them right out.
After all the nails are out, then you can store the molding in a safe place, and it'll be ready to reuse later. We're on the 4th day of this renovation, and you can tell a big difference already. Now, before we had a large room here, but it just didn't feel that large because the ceiling was fairly low, and we had several light tunnels from skylights that just dominated the entire ceiling. Now, with that removed, and our carpenters have been able to move forward with the 2x8 rafters that were installed, nailed directly to the existing 2x4s. Also, the 2x6s that create a flat spot on the ceiling itself to kind of tie the roof together as kind of a collar bracing. Now, that also creates a small little chase that runs the length of the room that'll really be an advantage when our air conditioning contractor ties into the terminated ductwork there up overhead to supply air conditioning and heating to this room. Our electrician and plumbers also started to take advantage of that chaseway.
The electrical work that's being done is for the most part actually for this room. Rerouting wiring and mounting fixtures for lighting in the new wood ceiling comprises the bulk of the work for the electrician, but it has to be done right because once the wood is cut around the fixtures, changes are not an easy option. The plumber's work mostly has to do with water and gas lines that were routed above the ceiling over this room. Their origins and destinations won't change, but the paths they take to get there will be a bit different than they were before.
The homeowners decided to remove the existing doors on this end of the remodeled room and replace them. Now, to compensate for the loss of the skylights and the natural light in there, instead of going with a 6'8" tall door, they're going with one that's 8 foot tall with side lights. That should more than compensate for the loss of the natural light, especially since this is on the west side of the house.
The idea is to let in the light, not moisture, so all of the doors and side lights have a vapor barrier applied around the perimeter before the units go in. It's also important that every unit be perfectly level, not only for the sake of appearance, but for the sake of function. Inside, we have to frame up the area above the doors before we can begin installing the new V-groove paneling. The crew takes their time laying out the V-groove for the ceiling because they want to be sure that the partial pieces which are left on either side are equal to each other. Attention to this type of detail in planning and excellence in execution of the installation are the things that make a wood ceiling look great. This is no assembly line process. Each board is measured, cut, and tapped into place so that it fits like a glove. Special care is taken for curve cuts like these around the recessed light fixtures. These cuts are pretty easy in a drywall ceiling, but in wood they require exact measurements and precise cutting. A project like this one requires a little more work, but the results are worth the effort.
Boy, the guys did such a great job on the seam that we have where the flat part of the ceiling meets the slope part. You know, if you take your time and really tighten the seams up on a wood ceiling like this, you don't have to have any of the molding that so many people use. A piece of molding like that can detract from the look of a wood ceiling considerably. Wait till you see the stain that we're going to put on this to tie everything together. That'll be right after our best new product of the week.
Let's join Danny at the Home Center to check out this week's best new product.
Many of the small projects that you may do around your home probably don't require heavy-duty power tools. Many of the tool manufacturers are recognizing this and starting to create these smaller, very compact type tools that work very well with smaller hands. Here's a good example of it from Skil. It's called the IXO palm-size screwdriver. Now inside the little cookie-like tin here, you have everything you need for many of those projects, including the cordless drill. Now this is powered by a lithium-ion battery, so once it gets charged up, you got plenty of power, and your reverse switch and forward switch is there just above the trigger. Now they say once this is charged up, you won't have to charge it again for 18 months because it can be so frustrating if you're trying to take on just a small little project and you go and grab your cordless drill and the battery's dead and you have to wait to charge it up. That will not be a problem with this one. Also in the kit you have your charger and a very convenient 34-piece bit set with just about every kind of bit that you can imagine included with that. Now, if you want to use this for cookies, to store your cookies, you can just throw this right in the kitchen drawer. It's small enough. The precautions that we took at the start of this job to prevent any damage by covering everything up have really paid off. The floor is in great shape. We just finished cleaning it, and a look at the wall shows no damage at all. The trim in great shape. That saves a lot of money on any remodeling project if you can really minimize the damage so that you don't have to do any more work than you're planning on. Now we're leaving the plastic up on this opening and our other opening just to prevent any dust that may be generated by finishing the project from getting in to the rest of the house. Now the material that we used on the ceiling is the exact same type of material that was used on the walls several years ago, so it only makes sense to finish the ceiling the exact same way the walls were finished, with a white stain. That means our painter has a lot of work ahead of him. With any finish, this much overhead work is a chore, but stain, which is semi-transparent, requires more attention than either a clear finish or a solid coating. Our painter, Kyle Jackson, and his helper, Ron, are rolling on the stain with a paint roller in a small area, then brushing it out before the stain soaks into completely. To avoid any one spot being coated more heavily than another, they never let the rolled areas overlap. This way, one area can be feathered into the next with the brush to better manage the stain's consistency. This part of the job is also time-consuming, but here again, it pays off. Kyle, you did a great job in matching the color of the new ceiling to the color on the walls that have been there for 15 years. How did you approach it?
Thank you, Danny. We took, first we had to realize they were using latex in the original. Normally with pickling, it's an oil process. In today's age, a lot of people are using your latex products. What we found is instead of your 70-30 mix normally found in your oil, we found a 2-to-1 mix in this latex to match.
So you had to mix that much water then with the latex to thin it down to get the finish on it.
Exactly.
I see. Now I saw you using a roller and then a brush behind it to back brush it. Have you found that that works best on this?
Yes, sir. In a lot of situations, we would take and spray it up, still using a brush to get into grooves of your V-grooves wood ceiling.
I see.
However, we could control it better with the roller, not getting anything on a brick or anything on the mantle.
Yeah. A lot of times when you have the ornate stone or all the other areas that you could get paint or stain on, it's a lot better not to use a airless sprayer. Now, what do you have going on here? You got your grills, I guess, for the new doors, huh?
Yes, sir. This is the final stages. We're getting these up. Our doors already ran, and we'll be out here.
All right. That sounds great, man. You did a good job. Now, this is a wood ceiling. It looks great in a lot of different houses, and this shape ceiling is one that a lot of people really like because it really adds a lot of volume to a room. But there are a number of other ways to have a specialty ceiling. Probably the most popular finish for wood ceilings is a simple clear sealer.
It seems that most people who want a wood ceiling want all the wood's warmth and grain to show through, but because this sometimes can mean a darker space, adding skylights instead of removing them as we've done here is a popular idea with those same people. We also get a lot of requests for beadboard ceilings. These narrower, more delicate looking planks are great for more ornamental applications like this turtleback ceiling we've created to cap off a wood-themed family room. For a more rustic feel, we used rough-cut cedar, stained a light color to finish this gazebo-style ceiling, adding interest and lots of vertical space to the room. Custom ceilings, however, aren't all about wood. The idea usually is to add a sense of space or drama or both to a room. This simulated English coffered ceiling does that by combining drywall with a little well-placed wood trim. Simple geometric patterns like this one in this stepped octagon ceiling also create a nice effect for more formal areas. And sometimes just a small rectangular recessed area, often called a tray ceiling, will give a room a little more style and a feeling of spaciousness. After Kyle, our painter, completed all of the painting work and removed all of his drop cloths, all we had to do is just a little bit of cleaning and wiping down, and the homeowners could have their movers start moving all of their furniture back in their remodeled room. Now, if you remember, we had a couple skylights right in the center of this room, which really introduced a lot of natural light into the room, but the homeowners were a little scared about leaks down the road, so they decided to eliminate those, and we had to do a little bit of work on the outside to patch in the two areas on the roof with some of the simulated slate pieces that were left over from a previous roofing job. So all of that's been done, and they're starting to move back in, and when we come back, we'll show you the recap of this project and everything completely finished.
Let's head outside for Around the Yard with lawn and garden expert Tricia Craven-Worley.
You know, Tricia, I've seen people planting small little tender plants a little early in the season, and the frost ends up taking care of those. What about planting seeds? Do you have to be concerned with the temperature?
Absolutely. You know, seeds are just as important, if not more susceptible to some of those problems. And of course, it's the frost that's the big problem across the United States. Here in Southern California, we don't have so much of that problem.
Right.
Well, you know, the seed companies have given us a guideline, of course, on the back where they will show you your region and give you a kind of a few months that would be optimum time to plant. But something else that we need to take into account is the temperature. And frequently companies will talk about, well, make sure that it's not freezing or that it's about 50 or whatever. We're not talking about this. We're actually talking about the ground.
Okay, well, how can you determine the temperature of say, the dirt that you have in your yard?
Well, believe it or not, one way is to take its temperature. Now, this is an instant read thermometer that I've used in cooking for a long time, but I just noticed I've broken part of it, but I think it's still going to work just fine. So I've adopted it for the garden. And in sticking it way down deep, and as again, it's an instant read, I'm seeing that it's coming down to 60.
Oh, I see.
Obviously, that's a very, very comfortable temperature for the plants. So as long as it's a nice, moderate temperature, I think we're fine.
Of course, a wood ceiling costs a lot more than a drywall ceiling, up to 3 times as much. But with a room like this and so much wood on the walls, I can't imagine using anything else on the ceiling. We started the transformation by removing all of the drywall after carefully covering up the floor. After the drywall was gone, we could start the important carpentry work that would allow the removal of all the lower part of the roof trusses. A new 8-inch ridge beam was snaked into place and new rafters installed. Electrical, plumbing, and ductwork relocations were completed, and insulation was next. Then a couple days of woodwork on the ceiling, and the painter took over to blend everything together. It feels a lot larger and looks a lot better, and obviously you can tell what a big change you can make in a room by simply changing the ceiling style. I hope you enjoyed this week's show. I'm Danny Lipford. We'll see you next week. Hey, thanks for watching this episode of Today's Homeowner. And don't forget to comment, like, and hit the bell icon so that we can notify you when new videos are posted.
And don't go anywhere, click around and continue the home improving fun.